Thinking about it. And we are live. I guess we're here. I saw
Nice.
something this week that made me so self-conscious. Everyone was like, every live stream on YouTube begins with people going, "Are we live? I think we're live. We're live? I think
Yeah,
we're hi. Are
yes.
we live? Can anyone see us?" And it made me so self-conscious because we
Yes.
do it every single time.
Yep, yep, yep.
But
But even the big ones does it. So like, well, some Twitchers don't do it because they just turn on the camera, let it roll while they go get coffee. So
that's
that's not a
true.
big deal.
That's very true. I did just notice, actually, now that YouTube's caught up, it did catch me coming back and sitting down in my chair. So it went live a little bit earlier than I realized, which is good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everyone. We have some people here already. So glad
Yay!
to see some familiar faces. Thanks once
Mm-hmm.
again for joining us. Those of you who have been
Yes.
here before, you know the deal. But for those of you who are new, this is a manga masterclass with I'm Kae Winters. I work with TOKYOPOP, and this is the wonderful Natalia Batista, the artist and
Hello.
writer and mastermind behind Sword Princess Amalthea.
Yes. And
Yeah.
today we're going to talk about how to create storyboards for your manga. So we've been talking for 5 lessons now about how to create your own manga.
Yeah.
And we were thinking of why not. Um, are you sure we're live though?
We are. We are live.
Yeah.
You guys can see us,
Okay.
right? I'm going to
Um,
assume that they can see us until they tell us they're not. It looks
okay.
like we're live here, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yes, we are live. Yes. So yeah. So this lesson is gonna be kind of a continuation of the previous lesson, just like we done before, and that's why I right now have the script in front of us. I hope you're all people are ready to work with your scripts and make them into comics now.
Mhm.
Um,
It's worth pointing
but
out
if you
that this
don't, yeah,
is this is a course. This is a series of classes.
yes,
If you haven't done this before, thank you. Everyone is now confirming they can see us. Thank you so much, guys. Um,
awesome.
yeah, so if you go to tokyopop.com/manga masterclass, you can see all of the previous classes. You can see some
Mhm.
of the cool assets that Natalia's made. We had the character creation where she designed these very
Yes.
cool characters, and you can see the full image there. Um, Make sure that you stay up to date with all of the different classes. And if you've already got something, someone I see says that they're already working on a manga right now. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yay!
Um,
Yes.
and you're very welcome. You're very welcome for the lessons. If you hadn't already started creating a manga, this class should help you get started. Should help you figure out what
Yeah.
tools you need, how to create it from nothing up to a finished,
Hmm.
completed manga.
Yeah.
And at the end, we are going to have a contest. We do want you guys to send us what you've made. And we will be picking a couple. We'll get some prizes of some Tokyopop manga, and a lucky winner will get to have a one-on-one Zoom call with Natalia, portfolio review, and she will give you personalized advice on your manga. So it's a really, really, really cool opportunity. So that's, I think, the primer here. I will turn everything over to Natalia.
Yeah. And I also want to start by saying if you haven't checked it out, and if you are a fan of my manga, Sword Princess Amalthea, first of all, if you haven't read it, it's both available in book form. Tokyopop have it as a in book form, but also in their app, Pop Comics. So if you want to read it digitally and not have to go to the store, you can download the app and you can buy it in the app instead. So that's one way. And also, the manga is now getting a standalone sequel in form of a visual novel, and the Kickstarter. Maybe we can put the Kickstarter link in the description again, like last time, because I think you might be interested in that as well. And as part of the Kickstarter, you can get the manga books signed by me. That I order them from Tokyopop and sign them, and then send it out to you. So that's one way to get the manga if you're interested in my manga. But now we're going to talk about your manga, of course, of how to create your stories. So last time we talked about how to create a manuscript, and we, like you can see on the screen, This is the script that we created. It's a story. I just came up with a story called The Witches of Aeolia. And we talk, and it's a little bit about a young girl who lives in the kind of 18th century town in mid-America, and she notices that she has some kind of magical powers, but she's not showing it to her family because it's a very religious time. And in the final scene, in the scene 4, which was the one we fleshed out a little bit, it's the scene where two cloaked women, or two women who just joined their family for staying over. In the middle of the night, they wake her up and they're cloaked and they have blood running down their eyes, and they have dark hands of coal, like dirty of coal. And they lead her out of the house. And that's kind of, if you could make this into a longer story, this would probably be like the first chapter, the first or the second chapter, just to kind of entice the reader to keep going. So it's very much of an open ending. This is probably not a good one shot because you don't get to know what's happened to the girl. I recommend you to, if you want to do a one shot, and especially if you're going to do it for a competition, there's a lot of manga competitions out there right now. And if you're going to make a one shot, make sure it has an ending somehow. And it doesn't have to be like the whole ending of the whole character's arc, but some kind of an insight where the character realizes something about themselves, about the world, about their position in the world, and learn something from that insight. And that is pretty much what you need to have in a story to make it complete. So if you don't know how to end the story, make sure at least you have somewhat of an personal growth. That's kind of the goal with a story.
And it's
And
worth
in this, yeah.
mentioning, just to
Mhm,
elaborate on something that you just said about these manga contests. There
mhm,
are a lot of manga contests. There are quite a few. I know Shonen Jump has one every year. There's the silent manga auction that I know you're a fan of, Natalia.
mhm.
There's quite a few. These generally do accept overseas submissions, so it is worth considering whether you want to apply for any of them. And the competition's going to be high. These are really tough contests, but they appreciate a fresh look on manga. So if you hone your skills a little bit, you can always try to apply to some of these contests.
Yeah, and the good thing with the contest is it's not about winning. It's also about, it's mostly, I think, about, just like I said, a good story needs to have a character development, a character insight, where the character gets to know a little bit about themselves. And that is pretty much what the comic should be for you as well as the creator, because it should be a position or situation for you where you can learn a lot about your work process. So I think the reason why you should do a comic for a competition is because you get to have a reason to finish your comic and to deliver it on time to a special goal. And even though you don't win, it's not important. The important thing is that you finished a comic. A good
Yes.
comic is a finished one. If you have finished it, it's good. And that's why I think it's so important to, especially in the beginning of your career, make a lot of short stories, make a lot of one shots that finish in just maybe 30 pages or 50 pages at most. Don't start your own Naruto. It's that wasn't Kishimoto's first work, and it shouldn't be your first work either. Make
Yes.
sure you practice short stories first. So that's important.
I will say that is
So
something
yeah.
that does come up quite a lot because obviously we get a lot
Mhm,
of submissions of manga. People will say to us, I'm making a manga. Would you guys take a look at it? Of course, we're always willing to
mhm,
take a look. We have a lot of people that present very early manga. They're very clearly early on in learning how to make manga. We all start somewhere. Um, but they will say, this is the basic storyline. This could go on for 30 volumes. We're immediately not going to be able to pick that up. That's too
oh.
much for a beginner
Mhm,
creator because you're still learning pacing. You're still learning how to organize your workspace and how to get your pages done on time. It's very easy to burn out if you're trying to do too much at once. Keep it short and sweet.
mhm.
One volume,
Yep.
perfect. Or a series
Yes.
of short stories, those are excellent too. But yeah, don't aim too high. Those huge series, those are really 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 hard work. And as we mentioned in the
Yeah.
last class, someone like Kishimoto Sensei has assistants. He is not doing all of the art by himself. He has got a whole team of other people doing backgrounds and vehicles and costumes and all kinds of like little bitty bits of the manga. So keep in mind, if you're doing it all by yourself, keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of artists who have read Bakuman, for example, in Bakuman, which is, I think we mentioned it last episode as well, it's about two young guys to start making their own manga together. They're like 15-year-old and they apply for the Shonen Jump magazine and they get in. And it's like, it's easy for us to read the manga and think, oh, this is possible, this is what you should do. Most manga artists are not 50-year-old, and most manga artists cannot make what is like 100 pages in a week or something that this character does just to practice how to create manga. And like, the manga is exaggerated. Remember that. Even Bakuman, even though it takes place in somewhat of a modern realistic world, it has some exaggeration because it's more fun that way.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be fun to show a real mangaka's life because it's pretty boring.
That would be so boring.
Yeah, it is a lot of just sitting around. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a little bit of glamorous. Don't take it 100%. So, what we're going to talk about here is focus on making short stories and focus on learning the craft before you kind of take on a big challenge like 500-page manga or more. So, for example, my manga Sword Princess Amalthea, which is 520 pages, that wasn't my first work. I had, by the time I started making Sword Princess Amalthea, I had already finished over 1,000 pages of manga. I'm not kidding you, 1,000 pages. And most of those 1,000 pages are short stories, at the most 30 or 40 pages. And that was why I practiced a lot and got really fast. So when I started making my longest work, Sword Princess Amalthea, I already knew I could deliver. And that's important, like Kae says.
Yeah,
It's important to know that you can deliver.
Yeah, we actually had somebody pointed out in the comments here that in the manga, in Bakuman manga, the main character was put in the hospital for overworking himself. So
Yeah.
definitely not something to emulate. I think it's, yeah, like you said, it's definitely good to know your own pacing, to know what you can handle. Really, really, really solid advice there. Make sure you pay attention to that one, guys.
Yeah. So let's start with our storyboards. So what we've done before is we talked a lot about creating characters, developing the world, developing the script, and now is the actual moment when you start creating the manga. And that's why I'm just gonna tell you straight up front, this is gonna be a painful step for most people, and especially when you're very like early on in your process and you don't know exactly like what is a big and a small frame, how should I do this. When you're in that position, remember it's gonna take time to learn not only how to make manga but also how you make manga. Because one thing I want to tell you is, when we talk a lot about like, when you see a lot of people who maybe practice certain styles within manga, maybe they do a lot of fan art and they have their favorite artists, and you can see that they kind of become copycats in some ways, and you can clearly see their inspirations. I'm not saying that is a bad thing because you're still learning the craft. One thing that is really hard to copy though is how you tell a story, because that is so much about how we perceive the world. So you can copy a style, but you can rarely copy a way of storytelling. Sure, you can copy manga pages, and you can, by reading a lot of manga from a certain artist, you can learn how that artist tells a drama scene or an action scene. But if you're gonna sit down and draw your own manga, you're still gonna make it out of your point of view, how you view the world and how you create everything. And this is why I think it's so interesting when people outside of Japan is making manga, because we're gonna create manga in our kind of cultural way. There's gonna be a cultural difference, and I think you should accept that and embrace it.
Yes.
Instead of kind of trying to become a Japanese person when you create manga. I think there's much more gold in us creating American manga, Swedish manga. I'm from Sweden, for example, so I always say I'm making a Swedish manga. I think that's much more interesting if we can see manga as a global phenomenon and not just a Japanese phenomenon. And also I had this discussion in some groups online where people said, no, you have to be Japanese to make manga. And I just have to make clear that my position with this is that manga is a recipe, and if you learn the ingredients, you can make your own manga, just like you
Yes.
can make your own pasta. You don't have to be in Italy and calling yourself being in Italian to make good pasta. You can make pasta in America, and it will be American pasta.
Yep.
And there's a certain recipe to pasta. And if you follow the recipe and make it your own, you can create pasta from that part of the world. So that's how I see manga, and we can maybe put aside the discussion on whether manga is Japanese comics or not. Like you can have the discussion with me somewhere else, but right now I'm gonna say manga about all comics that you consider is manga. If you call your manga, then it is a manga. That is my position.
I completely
So
agree with you, Natalia.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
I mean, as Natalia
Mm.
knows, at TOKYOPOP we have a program called International Women of Manga, which
Mhm.
Natalia is one of our founding members. Which we take manga that has been created all around the world by women who grew up reading manga, loved it, and went, I can make my own. And you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. Every single one of them is different because they're all taking a different cultural emphasis. And on top of that, you also see what's really popular in that part of the world, or what was popular for them growing up. We have a manga called Scarlet Soul that when I picked it up, I immediately thought, this looks like Yona of the Dawn. It's very, very
Mm.
similar. We have one called Deep Scar that reminds me of Nana. We have
Mhm.
Goldfish, which reminds me very much of sort of Naruto, very
Mhm.
shonen-esque art style. They're all completely different and they're all wonderful in their own way, and they're all manga. Yeah, locally sourced. I love that.
Yes, yeah. I saw
Yeah.
that too.
So yeah.
And yeah, and also think that it's very interesting to see how different artists tackle manga in different part of the world, and how we can kind of see how people. The funny thing is, when we read manga, we also consider part of the manga is part of the culture that is presented in manga. The schools look a certain way, the dress codes in the school, the history is special, like ninjas and samurais and stuff like that. That is typical manga from Japan. And I think it's more interesting when you start thinking, like, what is my country's equivalence to ninjas? What is my country's equivalence to high school students? And like, how could I present a world that I know, and that is kind of that would also be more exotic for them. Like I've talked to Japanese people, showed them my manga, and they say, "Yeah, this is manga, but this is like this is something else than what we see from Japan, but it is manga." So even Japanese people think what we make is manga. Like I have even shown them. Like in Sweden, we have some artists that are not calling themselves manga artists; they are comic artists, and they make styles that are different. They're maybe more alternative, more underground-ish in their style, and it's really popular in Sweden, this style. And I showed my Japanese friend, this comics, and I said, "What would you call this?" And she's like, "This is manga. It's
Yep.
ugly manga, but it's manga." It's still manga for her. So manga for her
Yeah.
is just a word for comics.
That's
So yeah.
I was just gonna say that when I was last in Japan, I was
Mhm.
chatting with a few people, and they would say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I work for a manga publisher in North America." And they would say, "Oh, like Spider-Man." That was
No,
always,
no, no.
always the title they said was Spider-Man, which I found very revealing.
Yeah,
But they assumed when I said manga, they heard comic book. So
yeah, yeah,
I think that manga fans in North America, or outside of Japan, I should say, tend to be more precious about what the word manga means. Where for
yeah,
actual Japanese people, it just means comic book. So I guess the
yeah.
whole point of this whole little derail here is don't stress. It's okay. You're
Yeah.
making manga. You're a mangaka.
Just
You're doing great
create.
work. Just create.
Yes. So I'm gonna use this program called Clip Studio Paint, and as you can see, we show the whole interface because I'm gonna show some things you can make in this program. If you don't use this program, if you use some other program, a lot of them have similar tools and they work similarly. And you can also do this all on paper, so you don't have to use a digital program. I'm gonna just talk about it in general, and next, the couple of episodes from now, we're going to talk more about actually working with different tools. At this moment, it's mostly a generalized a way of talking about how to draw and what to think about. So first of all, what we talk about when we talk about storyboards is the actual very quick sketches you do before you make the actual manga. And the important thing is here, first of all, to not make them too detailed. And I usually don't live by my own rules. I make them too detailed, and this is a big problem because then it's harder to change things. So my recommendation is, especially when you're new, to always make very simple thumbnails or storyboards, as they're called. They're called thumbnails as well, storyboards and thumbnails. Storyboards is actually more of a film or movie term or animation term. In comics, you should actually talk about thumbnails, because the idea is they should be small as thumbnails, but not as real thumbnails. But they should be tiny, just because you should make them easy. But I don't recommend you to draw them too tiny, because that will be hard to see. So I think we're gonna talk about here about just how to do simple sketches. And second of all, make sure you have beta readers, because at this point, like we talked last time, showing a manuscript to someone, if you show this manuscript that you've made and the actual text manuscript, let's see if I can find it here, the text manuscript. The problem with that one is that I personally feel that if the manuscript is meant for a comic, showing the text manuscript for a beta reader is kind of like letting someone listen to a movie but with a blindfold on. It's like you can't see the pictures, and half of the thing with a movie is the pictures. So it's a little bit, there's a lot of information lacking in the text manuscript, and that is why I recommend you to, this step you can keep for yourself. Of course, if you have a very trusted colleague, or if you have a collaborator, of course you talk about this step as well. And sometimes editors want to see this step as well. But I think most of the time what editors, especially in Japan, but also in other parts of the world, they really want to see the sketches, the storyboards. So that is what we're going to talk about today. This is, you need to make them easy to read but not too complicated. Like, you should be able to see that this is a certain character, and sometimes you can make it easy, but just you don't have to draw the whole character. You can just, like, if you draw the character like this, you can say, okay, this is character B, so you just put a B in their face and they're happy. So now you see this is a character that is happy, and it's character B. So it doesn't have to be more complicated than this. And maybe they're waving, and this is their hand waving, and this is the level you should put your drawings on, really. I don't, but I've actually also done a lot more comics than you, so don't go by the pros.
Do as
Start where
Natalia
everybody else.
says, but not as she does.
Yes, that is my rule. Yes. And before we start, I'm also going to talk a little bit about different frame sizes, because that is important. Yeah, so simple sketches, but think about the manga page design before you actually start doing the sketches. So don't just make frames. We're going to talk about the sizes of the frames. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about different sizes of frames. We have the difference between big and small frames, and I'm going to just draw examples here. Big frames, of course, can show a lot more. So we can have, for example, a whole view, like panoramic view of a small house here. And you see, it's very simple sketches. This is the level you should have. Maybe we have some mountains in the background. We're like introducing a shot with some clouds, maybe some birds flying, just to get some life in it here. Maybe we see a character here and a character here. This is what a big frame means. You can put a lot of information in it. You can also even add some speech bubbles, people are talking or something. Big frames, a lot of information. Small frames, less information. So small frames are for example, you can see there's a hand here picking something up from the ground. So you have the grass here. Small frames, little information. Big frames, much information. So this is the difference between big and small frames. We also have tall frames, and we have wide frames. And this is more tricky, because tall and wide frames, there's a reason to these. If you haven't already read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, I definitely recommend this for you. This is an extra read for you, people. And because in that one, he talks a lot about frame sizes and about what you can put in them. But one thing I would like to add to his theories about frame sizes, because what he talks about is that the bottom side of the frame, this is time. So the bottom side, or the width of the frame, talks about time. So if you have a very wide frame, you can put in more information. You can have one speech bubble, you can have a character, you can have another speech bubble and another character screaming, "Wah!" kind of like this. You can have, and the idea is that the reader will read, well, if it's Japanese manga, you read it this way. If it's Western manga, you read it the other way. Let's see, this way instead. So depending on which, like in which order you read it, of course it's going to be important, but the wide time differs. Now, there is one rule to this that we don't usually take into account, and this is a thing that is not mentioned in Scott McCloud's book, but I think should be mentioned, is the fact that this is for us in West, but that is because we write la 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 like this. But Japanese comics and Japanese text is up from top to down. This is how they write text in Japan. So this is a typical speech bubble you can find in American comics, in like Western comics, and this is a speech bubble in Japanese comics. And you see how this is time for us and this is time for Japanese people. So actually what you can notice in manga is that a frame that is wide in manga can actually be a quick frame, because this matters. This is time in manga. This one, this side here is time. And this is more time when it comes to American comics or Western comics. So a long frame, a tall frame, is actually a slow frame in a lot of mangas. This is like, it still differs from manga to manga or from even scene to scene, but you can notice there is a lot of frames in manga where you, for example, see one character walking and then there's another character walking in front. And since they're talking and the frames are very tall, this is actually a very long scene. This actually takes a lot more time to read because you read it from top to bottom. So to have these kind of frames, different sizes and width and length, it matters. And that's why I recommend you to read manga and analyze what you're reading. Analyze the frame sizes and like, okay, this frame is taller. Why? So that is also important.
It's
Another one,
also visually interesting.
yes.
Is something to
Yeah.
keep in mind, because you can get a manga that you flip through pages and you slowly start to realize that they're using the exact same frame sizes every time, over and over and over again. It does start getting kind of boring, but if you don't know
Yeah.
what, maybe there's a 2-page spread, maybe you've got a full page, maybe you've got a bunch of
Yes.
really quick ones, maybe some of the panels overlap, like understanding, I think you understanding why people use certain panel sizes is so important. And but also keeping in mind that it's also just going to look really interesting, so don't get
Yeah.
locked in with doing the same thing over and over again.
And we're going to talk about this during this episode, how you make a full spread. How important it is to work with both pages, both the left and the right page, and make them work together to lift your comic, and not not make them work against each other or be too similar to each other. If they're too similar, it's gonna get hard. And I'm gonna give you all the tips and tricks this in this episode. Another one is when you have diagonal lines between two frames, like this one, for example. So the thing with diagonal lines, compared to just having straight lines like this one, the straight ones are more calm. This is calm, and this is more action. More things happen. It's more dramatic. One thing, though, that I would like to say with diagonal lines is that make sure you don't create triangles, because this is really much of a waste of space. Because what you're doing when you create a triangle, like people like, oh, I'm gonna make manga, then you have diagonal lines, blah, 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 and then you make and make triangles. What you create is dead space. This is gonna be dead space. And by creating this kind of diagonal line, if you made it this way instead, if this is why you made it, how you made it, you're not going to have any dead space. You can still create everything here. You can use all the space here. So for example, if you're going to make this into a frame, you can have one character like pointing, like maybe pointing at the other character like this. Okay, this is a hand, and then like a face. Rah! pointing at this one. We have speed lines, and then we have the other character over here. Rah! And
I'm enjoying the sound
clenching your
effects.
fist. Yes, this is
This is great. This is some really great flavor there.
Rawr, rawr, yeah, something. So this way I don't create any dead spaces, but if I would create it in this one, you would notice that I would put this character here with the clenched fist, and I would put this character here with the pointy fist, and the result would be all this would be dead space, and all this would be dead space. I can't put text in there. It's gonna be just waste of space. So don't create triangles. That's unnecessary. Create still rectangles for four corners is very important, but you can make the line a little bit diagonal. That's a good way to create more action. And then important, the gutter between the frames, the space between the frames. You can have, for example, you have 2 frames where you have the space like this, and then you have the next space, the next frame below. So what you can see when you look in manga, one important thing when you talk about manga is that you can see that the spaces between mangas is actually different. I'm gonna pick up a page from one of my mangas just to show you an example. Let's see if I can find quickly one page from Sword Princess Amalthea, for example. This one is good. This is gonna be in Swedish, but it's not important. The text
That's
is just
fine. I don't think people can read it from here anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, this is actually 2 good examples. I'm gonna open these 2. So we have, for example, this page where you can see this gutter here. I'm gonna use if I can use color. I'm not sure, but anyway. So this gutter here and this gutter here, you can see it's different size, different spaces between the frames. So the horizontal and the horizontal, and this is horizontal, and the vertical lines are different space. And this is very important. Check in manga. This is actually one of the things that makes your manga look more manga, by making sure you have different size of space. And usually it's about 1 to 2, like 2 millimeters vertically, and maybe 5 millimeters or 7 millimeters horizontally. That is usually the basics, but use manga pages that you can see in manga books as example. So that's one thing that is important. And you can also see on this page example of frames that don't have gutter, like this one and this one don't have gutter. And what happens when you take away the gutter? Well, what you get is you get a more speedy history. Like the idea of gutter, the space between the frames, is this is also a thing that Scott McCloud talks about. That is where kind of the animation happens. That's where things develop. So it's important to have some space in between. Because that's where things happen, and our mind think that things happen. But if you want to speed up the story and say this is happening very quickly, so for example here Amalthea is looking through the keyhole and she's kind of poking around, and then suddenly she hears a crack behind her, and this is happening maybe within a couple of seconds, and that's why I removed the gutter to make it a little bit more speedy. So that's a thing I want to do not say this. So that's what I'm gonna talk, why I want you to remember the guttering as well. Now let's go to creating a basic manga page layout. I'm gonna create a new file in this program in Clip Studio Paint, and if you have Clip Studio Paint, I think this is the EX Clip Studio Paint EX, then you can actually create a whole manga book in the program. And I recommend you to be able to do this because it helps a lot. If you can't do this, you can actually also make just one page at a time. But the good thing with being able to work with the whole manga is that you can make spreads. It's a little bit more complicated if you want to make a double spread, like a double spread that is like a picture that follows the whole page, the whole spread of the book. It's hard to do that if you don't have this setting. This setting is only in the EX version, not the Pro version. Yeah.
We actually have a comment from someone here, from Empa Draws,
Yes.
said, just want to say, I noticed how you made Amaltea's bow and hair change in the last panel where she is surprised. I didn't realize until now. It's a cool effect.
Oh, I didn't notice. I didn't take. I removed the page from the program now, so I can't show it again. But yeah, go back in the live stream later, and you can see it. So that's cool.
We can actually
Yeah,
add
I
that
tried to.
page.
Yeah,
If you let me know which spread that
yeah,
is, Natalia,
yeah.
I will add that spread
Yes,
to the website, to the Manga
yes.
Masterclass page on the TOKYOPOP website, so you guys can actually like take a really good
Mhm.
close look at it.
Yeah, and I can mark the gutters as well, so you can see the different gutters, because that was a good example of a page with different gutters and different kind of frames as well.
Absolutely.
So we have a question. Yeah,
We do. Yeah, did you see
yeah.
that? Okay, excellent. Good. Go ahead.
How big canvas should you draw on when you draw pages? So this is the setup for drawing comic pages. First of all, in Japan, if you're gonna, well, the size of the pages depends on what is the outcome. Like, are you planning on making a fanzine? If you're, for example, going to make it in Sweden, we use copy machines that use A4 paper, and that means you need to have your size in A5, so half of A4, to be able to make a fanzine. But if you're going to send it into a competition in a Japanese manga magazine, they use B5. That's the manga magazine size. So you have to make it in B5. So depending on what kind of size you use, you need to know that beforehand. If you don't know, you can always use the A4 size, or even I think there's a B4. No, this is not a B4, but the A4 size you can also use. The problem is that the good thing with these programs is that they are not so tricky about the moire effect that we talked about some previous episodes before, because you can actually you can decide what size and what resolution your pictures should have when you export them. So it actually doesn't depend. What does depend is that the B4 and the A4, and like the B and A, and also the C format, which is more common in America. Letter format is another one that's is very common in America. They
Mhm.
have different proportions, and that is an issue. So if you're gonna make it for example, an American publisher, make sure you use that exact size that they want on the magazines or the books.
And also,
Mm,
it's worth
mm,
noting that sometimes it feels like when you're doing art that making it bigger and then shrinking it down is better. I can tell you with
yeah.
manga, as Natalia mentioned, mores,
Mhm.
that is an issue that we have come across, especially with new creators,
Yeah.
who maybe don't fully understand page layout and cropping. And when we come to crop the
Mm.
file to print it, we suddenly have to go back to the artist and say, no, you have to make all of these changes because
Oh,
your art is,
wow.
it's not a
And you don't want to
consistent
do that.
size. No, it's a huge pain for everyone. And on top of
Yeah.
that, again, so mores, to quickly, very, very quickly go back over
Mm.
that very quickly. You have tones that you use in manga, that you can
Mhm.
use to quickly color large areas to add effects. Um, those are patterns. They're usually like little dots in varying patterns that create varying
Mm.
shades of gray. The problem is with those dot patterns, if you size it down, they get wonky, and you'll end up with
Yeah.
weird like rippling effects and circles and checker marks and things that you don't
Yeah.
actually want. Sometimes it can accidentally look very cool and you realize, oh cool, I just gave this person a checked
But
shirt when I didn't want to.
not in the
But
face of characters, not in the face and the hair of the
no.
characters. That looks weird. So
And
yeah, you
it's,
don't want that.
yeah, and that's a big problem. If you go really big and shrink it down, you will get mores no matter what. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is what size you're doing it for when you're making it,
Yeah.
so that you can avoid all of that.
And I recommend, if you're already in contact with an editor, uh, send them some example pages before you actually finish them, and let them take a look and like say, okay, this setting is good, needs to be changed, so you don't like make a whole book in the wrong settings. Like, send them the pages and let them check it.
Yeah.
And that's always, I think, a good thing. If you have a chance to talk to an editor, the technical parts is so much of a learning process, and it's good that you learn them early on. And
Yeah.
they can probably tell you about the printing technical stuff at least. So that's
Yeah.
important to learn.
We already have somebody in the comments saying that that explains the issues they have with tones. So there you go. There's a little tip there from the inside.
Yeah.
We do also have a question. I don't know if this is something you're going to be going over a little bit later from Alebrije Moderno. Very cool name. Is there any process you use when thinking where to put your characters in composition?
Yeah, I will talk a little bit about that as well in this episode. So let's just continue on. So
Perfect.
I'm not going to talk too much about the settings. There's a lot of videos on how to use Clip Studio Paint, and I think this is not one of them. I think this is better we talk about the techniques of working with comics. But what I can tell is that I chose B5 size. I chose DPI 1200 DPI. This is the resolution. Bleed 5 millimeters I chose. This is how much extra space that you need to draw. You also need to fill with screen tones and on art, and that will be cut off when they print the book. I made the number of pages to be 20, and it's not because I know it's 20. I'm just going to have a little bit of extra space, and that's pretty much it. And then I say, okay, I click okay. What? It says which folder? Oh, I need to choose a folder. Ah, okay, so there's already one. So I'm gonna say just something else. Okay, good. So now it's gonna pop up. It takes some time. Blah 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 blah. And so I have my comics page. What I'm gonna do now when I get my comics page, when my computer is working with me, yeah, now it's gonna pop up. Now I see my whole comic. I think it's I usually don't work. I usually work on my iPad when I do my comics. But in this program, what you can do is if you, for example, like you see here, you can see all the pages. And if I click one page, I'm gonna see just that page. I'm gonna zoom in on page 11 because I double clicked it. And if it lets me do that, I can see just that page. But what I want to show you right now is how to use spreads and how to work with a whole. I want you to, when you do the storyboards, you need to think about both the left and the right page. So that's why I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to make them into a combined page. Let me see the page. Why can't I see the page? Oh, there it comes. So this is page 11 out of 20. But what I would like is that page 11 and page 10, these two, this is left, and this is Japanese reading direction. So the page 10 is before the 11, like here. I want these two to be combined. And what I do is I right click one of them, and then you can see combine pages. And there you can see how it combines 11 and 10 into a full spread. It takes a little bit of time. And you can also split the pages again. So if you choose to make it into a double spread, as you can see, it became a double spread now. I'm going to double click so I can get the whole spread up. And if you at any point want to split them again, just right click and choose split pages. As you can see, that was available in the example. So you can choose here split pages if you want to. But I want to see them. There. I have a little bit of, it's a little bit slow, this program at this moment, but I think it's gonna work anyway. So now we see the double spread here. And the thing with Clip Studio Paint is that it works with frames. So I'm gonna make a new page here. It says that these pages are two different frames, and I want to work with all of it. So I'm gonna take away these frames at this moment, and I'm just gonna work with all of it as a big frame. So just one layer that is covering the whole page. Because at this moment, I just want to show you examples. When you actually work with your manga, I recommend you to work with each page by itself, because that's easier for the printing process and for the exporting. So when you're working with only combined pages, that is actually gonna be spreads. So don't do what I'm doing right now. I'm just why I did this is just because I want to show you how you should think. Even though it's not a double spread, it's not going to be a picture of all over the whole picture, I still want you to remember both the pages should work together. So what we can do is we can actually make frames in Clip Studio Paint. And the frames, I'm going to see if I can find the frame tools here. You can actually make frames like these. You can see here. Here's one frame, and now it pops up as a new layer in my layer, among my layers. So the good thing is that, and let's see if we can, yeah. you can cut borders here. So under the sub tool, you can actually cut the borders. So when you can see, you can decide where to cut it. At this point, it cuts the same size, but I want to cut it in different. Let's see, the space here. I want it to be vertical gutter to be, let's say 50, and horizontal gutter should be maybe 100. Yeah, that's better. So you can see like I said, the vertical and the horizontal gutter is different. Let's see if we zoom in on these. As you can see here. Yeah, there. So this is the frame. This is a horizontal gutter, and if I'm gonna make a vertical gutter, as you can see, it's gonna be a little bit thinner. And you can always change these under the tool property. You can change the sizes of the gutters. But this is how you divide a page in Clip Studio Paint into frames. When you draw it on a paper, you just use a ruler as normally. And this is why we talked about the big and small frames beforehand, because as you can see, you can always choose to have, if we go back and we make a very, very simple basic setups. This is the page, and we divide it into, maybe we just make it very, very simple, like just like a cross like this. We just make like this. And some people start out their comics career by just making like 4 squares, and that's how they make their comic. The issue with this is that if we made the gutters the same size, if we made all of the gutters the same size, it wouldn't be easy to understand in what order to read the comic. Is this, do you read it 1, 2, 3, 4? Or do you read down, or what? You don't know what order you read them. Like, should you read downwards or left or right? And that's why you, as an artist, when you decide the frames and in what order they lay on and the sizes, you're actually guiding the reader. And that's why when you, for example, should do this page more interestingly, is that we have this and we want to divide it into frames. So make sure, for example, if you want it to be like a top and a bottom, make sure that the top frames and the bottom frames doesn't line up. This page is much easier to read compared to the exact cross. The exact cross, you don't know which frame to read first and the second, but this way you know that, okay, these 2 top frames, they are one strip, one strip comic, and the bottom ones are one strip. They are combined, they are sequences, and you read the top ones first and then the bottom ones. This is how you should think of every time when you make the frames and you divide the frames on one page. If you want to make, for example, 3 levels, you can do the same thing, even with diagonal lines. If you have it like this, make sure you never line them up, so that if this is kind of 6 frames on one page, make sure that each level is its own strip comic, kind of. And you can also make that in manga. You often see a lot of the pages that have more of a horizontal reading. So maybe you have a reading that is, you maybe have one frame that is tall, and then you have maybe like more like this. And you can see how this is also very common in manga, that you have one frame that's very tall, maybe an introduction of a scene or a character, and then you have kind of a combination of frames on one of the sides of the tall frame. And that's also one way to make the comic easy to read and understand in what order to read, because we know we need to, if we read from left to right for Japanese reading direction, you start with the big tall frame and then the top frame next level, and then the small 2 frames on the bottom. So this reading direction is very important, and it depends on how you divide the pages. Second of all, now this page is very simple. What we see here is that I focused on putting the frames on this inner square. I need to talk about the squares as well. The inner square here of the page, that's where you put the frames. This space here around the frames is the margins. They're still going to show when you print. They're going to be part of the print. But you don't want to put faces, hands, or text in the margins because they can still be cut out or maybe hurt when in the printing process they might be like hurt or something, and you don't want to put important information in the margins. So don't put information there that shouldn't be risked of getting cut out. I've
But
done that
do
mistake,
put,
and yeah.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, do draw into those lines though,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, the idea with the printing process is the printer
Yeah.
will print out the entire page and then they'll use a
Yes.
machine to trim it, but that's not
Yeah.
an exact process. So frequently when we lay out pages, we will get
Mm-hmm.
feedback back sometimes where they'll say, hey, there's a speech bubble very close to the edge here. Are you sure you want to
Yeah.
leave that there? Or something like that. It's okay if
Mm-hmm.
it's the tail of somebody's coat or the back of their foot or something. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome to cut out, but you don't want to lose, like Natalia said, you don't want to lose faces, you don't want to lose text. You don't want to lose any very important information there. We do have a question
Mm-hmm.
about bleed sizes, Natalia. I assume
Yeah.
that that's something you're going to go
Yes.
over. Okay, perfect.
So I use the metric system in this program, but I recommend you to use the standard settings for Clip Studio Paint bleed. But usually I think it's for metrics, it's 5 millimeters. And I think that is um, 1 inch is 5 times that. So a quarter or a fifth of an inch.
Sounds
Is
about
that a
right.
sound? Yeah, sounds about right. But I mean, better use too much. So if you use half an inch, that's good as well. Like better too much bleed than too little.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had printing companies or printers cut off as much as 6 or 7 millimeters, which is a third of an inch, and that is like things was you could see the white because I hadn't drawn so much. I didn't plan on them cutting so much, so sometimes they mess up, and usually you can make them pay you back if they do that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you have to live with it. Like if it's 1,000 copies, you don't want to burn 1,000 copies, and that's why you make sure to draw a certain amount of extra. So
Mm-hmm.
we have the margins here, and outside of the margins, that's the bleed. This is the skinny part here. That's the bleed. And the important thing is, if you draw, make sure if you're making characters that is gonna be, for example, standing like from the page like this, and you're gonna have a character like this. I don't know. I'm just drawing a sketch figure here, like this. Make sure you can see here, like the page will be cut like this. This is where the page will be cut. So hopefully, if everything goes right in the printers, you're gonna see just what is inside of this frame, but you still want to see, like if it gets cut the wrong way, you still want to have some extra drawing, even beyond the bleed, just to make sure that the printers doesn't mess up. So that's important.
Always have too much
Uh,
art. Always have too much art,
uh,
guys. I know we'll
yes.
definitely go over speech bubble placement and stuff later as well, but
Yeah.
always put art underneath your speech
Mm-hmm.
bubbles. They should be on a different layer because every
Yeah.
now and then we may need to move those. As your publisher, we may need to say,
Yes.
okay, this speech bubble needs to move. We need to shift things around. And every now and then we'll remove the speech bubble and there's nothing underneath. The artist didn't draw
Ooh.
anything underneath because they didn't
Yeah.
realize that was a thing. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing. So like Natalia said, it's always better to have too much than too little.
Yeah, and that's also why I recommend, if you're drawing digitally, you can always use layers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're drawing analog on a paper, I mean, a lot of manga artists see, oh, the Japanese people, they draw everything analog, so maybe I should do that as well. In Amalthea, for example, I knew I wanted to translate Amalthea into other languages, and that's why I made all the sound effects, the onomatopoeia, it's called, the sound
Mm-hmm.
effects, and all the speech bubbles in the computer. So actual the actual artwork is just the characters and the backgrounds, and sometimes not even the backgrounds, because sometimes I used I used photos, and then I traced my own photos in the program. So sometimes my pages are just the characters. That's what I did analog, and then I scanned, and then I did all of that, the text and the speech bubbles and the sound effects. I did them in the computer later on, just to be able, just like Kay says, to be able to change things and edit things in later on. But I
And it
still
will
have
make your
to,
publisher so happy
yeah,
when you hand them a file, when they say, do you have the layered files? And you say yes,
yes,
and you have the sound effects and the speech bubbles and the characters and
yeah.
the background, everything's on different layers. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's not as pretty as originals, but it's so much more practical in the process.
And also,
Yeah.
because I'm the marketing person, I'm going to add in a different angle here that you guys may not think
Mm-hmm.
about. When you get around to, okay, you've made your manga, you want to put it out there, you want to get people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to create marketing material from stuff you've already made. Well, this is a really
Mm-hmm.
cool panel, and it would make a perfect like picture in an
Mm-hmm.
ad or something, but it's got a huge speech bubble in the middle. But now you could just pull that speech bubble
Yeah.
out, and you've got the art right there. So think ahead,
Yes.
have it all
Yeah.
layered. You will make everyone's life easier, including your own.
Yeah. So next step is to think of the both spreads together and to work with them in combination. So I'm gonna move this a little bit aside because I want to see this full spread. Let's see if I can see them a little bit tinier. Yeah, that's good. So on this right page, right side page, we made a tall frame and then 3 levels. Now the important thing is that if you also make 3 levels on the other side, on the exact same spot, you're gonna confuse the reader as well, because now the reader doesn't know, should I read, like some readers, they are not used to reading comics or manga, and there's a risk that they're going to read the tall frame and then the top frame to the left of the tall frame, and then immediately over to the next side, because now you created kind of a, this part here became kind of a strip in itself, a strip comic in itself, a sequence. So don't make that mistake. And also it looks a little bit boring and stiff when you make it this way. So it's more important to think about spread together and think about, how do I make these frames not too similar, this space, these pages not too similar. So the next page I would, for example, divide into a up and down, a bottom and a top. Maybe I'll make like a small like this, or the sizes of the frame is important for the story. So don't just cut into sizes. You have to combine with the manuscript. I'm going to talk about that very soon. I just want to show you one thing with these pages. Yeah, this is the thing. One more thing. Yeah, I'm gonna go over to showing you how to do this storyboards, and then we're gonna spice up the page a little bit. So I'm gonna just go back to the layers here, and I'm gonna remove both of these grids because I don't like them and they don't fit my story. And I'm gonna go back to my manuscript. So now we're finally gonna make this manuscript into an actual storyboard. So we have the manuscript about the witches, and I'm gonna try to make this fast because we're already up to 1 hour now, but I'm gonna speed up a little bit so we have time to make the whole spread. And that's why I'm gonna make very simple sketches. I'm gonna show you how you should do it. So don't follow how I do it on my own, but follow how I do it right now. Let's, for example, say these ones. Page 18 and 19. The page 18 is a big frame, a big page where you see the 2 women is standing over her bed with their cloaks on. And the page 19 is she gets surprised, but she doesn't make a sound. And then the next frame is blood coming down from the woman's eyes. I would like to make this page, this spread, but I think actually it doesn't really show what I want to show. So let's start with the next one. Let's do this one instead because it has more frames, and I want to show you how to make more frames. So the page 20 is first frame, she looks down on their hands. Second frame, they are black from coal. Third frame, she doesn't scream, so the main character is calm. Fourth frame, instead, she sits up in her bed because she's in her bed. And then Sarah, the main character, she is Sarah. She whispers, "Who are you really?" because she knew them from yesterday when they entered her family home and asked for sleeping over, and suddenly they're next to her bed with bloody eyes, and that's a little bit scary. But she's not scared. That's the strange thing. And then the left page should be, because this is going to be a Japanese reading direction. You don't have to do Japanese reading direction if you don't want to, but I'm going to do it in this one because my settings in my program is that at this point. You can change that in the settings if you want to, but I'm not going to do that. So page 21, the first frame is the woman next to the bed, Sarah in it, the women next to the bed, and then second frame, her feet touch the floorboards, and then the cloaked women form a circle with their arms around her, and that's gonna be 3 frames, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm gonna just take this text, and I'm just gonna copy it, and copy, and I'm gonna make it. Either you can jump from the computer, the text program, to the art program, or you can just copy it like this and go back to the art program. And I usually just paste it as a text right in here. Just edit, paste, and then I have the text here. Let's see if I can make the text a little bit bigger so we can see it. Yeah, this is gonna be maybe. What? Yeah. A little bit bigger so we can see it. Please. My computer is a little bit slow now. Yeah, that's good, I think. We can see the text now, can't we? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's done. So now we have the text here in one layer. So if we go back to layers, we have a text layer where we have the this kind of information. And now we're gonna make this into frames. So I'm just gonna keep this over here, and then I'm gonna see page frame by frame. So the first one, we go back to the frame tool. We create this standard form. So I'm just gonna create this box. The first thing I do, create frame, and then I'm gonna cut it into frames. I need to put my text on top right now. There, top. And I'm gonna cut this box that I made into frames. That's gonna be for the first page, the page 20. So this is page 20. Let's say it's page 20. I have 5 frames. She looks down on their hands. They are black from coal. She doesn't scream. Instead, she sits up. Sarah whispers, "Who are you really?" And now I have to think in my head which frames are big and small. The first one, she looks down on their hands. So now I need to show her face and I need to show their hands. But not a zoom in version of their hands, but like I need to show where they are and where she is. On the page before, we know that they are next to her bed, but we don't know how close or like where are their hands when she looks at them. So the first frame is going to be an important frame, not too big, but not too small. It's going to show what is important. And we also need to see the black coal on their hands. That's also a very revealing scene. So I'm just gonna make, actually, I think it would work very well if I made it into a 3-level page spread. So I made one level like this. Let's see if I make one. Oh, I had this wrong tool. This one. So I made one level like this. Maybe a little bit lower, I think, like this, and then one skinny. So the third level will be just her face looking at them, very calm, and then she sits up. It's going to be a big frame, and up here I'm going to have the small frame here. It's going to be the first frame. So this one is going to be the first frame. She looks down on their hands, and now I go into this frame. As you can see here, I can draw in the frame. So here you just see her face. This is a very big pen. Let's see if I can make a little bit smaller pen. Yeah, that's better, I think. Well, maybe it's good with the big one, just so you can see what I draw. This is good. Yeah. So this is Sarah. So I'm gonna make an S up to her head. This is Sarah. And you can see this is the cloaked person. So this is a cloak. This is, we see the backside of the character. And then we see the hand. stretching out like this. Like this is how you should make the sketch. It's very simple. And Sarah's in her bed, so we can see she has like some kind of cover on her, like this. So this is Sarah. She's sitting in her bed. She's looking down, like you can see, on the hands. But we don't have to have an arrow of that. We just know that she's looking down on their hands because she's looking down. You can see that she's kind of looking down. And then the next frame, we see their hands, and we see that we just have a zoom in on the hands, and it's black with kohl. So this is just black. And this is going to be like a reveal, frame where you see the hands zoomed in like this. And if you want to, you can add some speed lines to show that this is an action loaded scene. But also, if you want it to be more calm and weird and scary, I would not add speed lines. I'm not going to add any speed lines here, actually. I'm just going to have it like the hands like this. The next frame is going to be just her face, Sarah's face. This is Sarah, and she's calm. And she's looking up on them instead now. She's a little bit like awake, just awakened. So she's a little bit maybe groggy or very, still a little bit sleepy, I think. But she looks up on them. So now she looked at her hands and now she's looking up. And the next frame we had, instead, she sits up. So this is, she was actually sleeping in the first page. In the first frame, I'm going to change that. So she's actually in the sleeping position in this one. So she's going to be more laying down like this in the bed. And this is her. I don't know if she has a pillow, or maybe the other kids is sleeping next to her with a pillow like this. This is the bed. And there's other people in the bed with her because this is the 18th century and they sleep together. So she looks at the hands and then she looks at them. So we still have the bed kind of like this. The characters looking up, and then she sits up and we see the movement. And also check how manga draws movement. We're going to talk more about that later. But this is, so we have the cloak figures. Here's one cloak and here's one cloak. This is a cape and the hands, and she sits up. So just simple sketch of how you want the picture to be. And this is the tricky part. Like, I'm not saying this is easy. This is really the tricky part. You have to learn how to see images in your head and quickly get them to paper. And that is what is about drawing. That is what drawing is about. And the last page is, who are you really? So now you have a zoom in on her face and she says this, who are you really? And I could put the text in the bubble, but I'm not going to do that right now. But she says that, so I'm just going to have her face like this. And this is Sarah. So this is how simple they should be. The next one is going to be also, we start out with a simple frame, base frame, and then we're going to cut it into pieces. So we have 5. This is also 5. Let's put this text on top here. Also 5 frames. The first one is we can move this one a little bit, I think. I'm just going to shut this one away at this moment and move this one. No, I need to see it. Yeah. So we have to just draw the frames behind this text because I need to see the text as well. First of all, the women next to the bed, Sarah in it. So we'll make, for example, we have these 5 frames, and I think the big with the characters standing next to the bed, I need to show them in a big frame. So I'm going to actually make a big frame that just spans over the whole like this. Or maybe I can make it actually a tall frame. Let's make it a tall frame. Let's make it into this instead. Like this. Oh, now my computer is slow again. Wait, let's see. Why does it show this? Let's not show rulers. Yes, good. So this one, we want it to be, the first one is the women next to the bed, Sarah in it. We can actually make it into a tall frame where we can see the bed from above. I'm gonna do that. And then the next one is her feet touches the floorboards. So I'm gonna make that into a small one, a small frame. But I want it next to another frame because I think it's a very small, quick movement. So I can make it even thinner. So I'm gonna make it into, I'm gonna split this top to top and bottom and just make one piece of this is gonna be her feet touching the floorboards. And this big one can be the cloak women form a circle around her. And that when you see the cloak women go next to her, and then they form the circle with their arms in the next frame here. I can even make it a little bit diagonal. And then the big frame down here is gonna be, you see the characters whole like forming a circle around her. So let's draw that in the frames now. And this is, like I said, the tricky part because you don't learn this overnight, but try to learn how to draw things in different ways. So this is gonna be the one of the cloaked ones. This is the cloak, and this is the other cloak. And I'm seeing this picture from above, so we see the bed here, and she sits up in the bed, and this is the bed from above. Like some, I don't know if they had beds back then, but I'm gonna do research on this if I did this manga. So she sits up, and you can see they have their hands stretched out like this. And this is gonna be very simple manga. But now we see the frame from above. If you think it's too zoomed in, you can always zoom it out a bit, and you can always like change the setting and everything and redraw as many times. But we can see the space of the room, and we see the maybe even some like walls behind here, so we can see this is a wall, this is the room. Next one is her feet on the ground, and we have to maybe even introduce that there's floorboards. So I'm gonna make the floorboards here in this frame, so you can see there's floorboards on the floor, because in the next frame we need to know that there's floorboards here. Maybe we have a window here, I don't know, like that. So in the next frame you see just the foot, her foot, and you see the bed here, and then you see the floorboards. So like you can see, it's very simple sketches. It doesn't have to be more than this. Like pretty much anyone can draw this. The tricky part is to know what kind of view you have in your head, how big frame it needs to be, how you make the information fit into the frame. The next one was the characters. I'm gonna see. Next one is the cloak form a circle around her. So the first step is you can see she stands up and she's here, and you see one cloak on one side, one cloak on the other side, and you still see like just a little bit of their hair and faces maybe, but they stand next to her like this. And this is the cloak, and you can see them moving, so I make some kind of like movement feeling of it. And the next one was they form a circle, so you can see one hand that's black. We introduced the black hands, so now we know it's the cloaked characters that have these hands. And we can see that they hold hands, they take each other's hands. And then we see maybe from straight from the side, we see the cloaked character, and Sarah in the middle, and the hands on each side of Sarah, like this. It's gonna be a tricky part to draw, but I think it could be really cool if you see this frame and the bed in the background, and the other kids sleeping in the bed and noticing nothing, because these are very mysterious characters. So now you see this kind of frame. It's going to be very dark in this scene, I think. So now we made the whole like scene, but the thing is, this doesn't look manga, does it? Like it sure, we use some frames in different sizes, but I'm going to make it more manga now. So now I'm going to show how to make this more interesting visually, to make it more of a manga page. So I'm going to take this correct line tool, and that way I can mark a line. Let's, for example, say that to make this more into a manga spread, first of all, in manga books, and you can always see that when you look into a manga book yourself, is that here in the middle is this is the spine of the book. You don't want to put information in the spine, because then the reader needs to break the spine to read it, and no one likes breaking the spine in their books. This is not how you do it. So don't put information in the spine that is important. Make it at most part of a spread image, but don't put faces, information, text, hands in the spine. And hands is because hands is important. It shows things that happens. So we don't want to make the frames bleed into the spine, but we could make the frames bleed to the outside. So on the right page, we can make, for example, the bleed upwards and outwards like this. This frame can, for example, bleed this way. And then we have even more space for this picture. So if we would like to change the picture, we can actually zoom it in even more like this. We can zoom it in like this and make it bigger. And that way we could zoom in more on her face and hand. Okay. And this way you can mangify your pages by making some frames bleed out into the margin and beyond, and make sure it bleeds beyond the bleed and all the way to the edge of the paper, the actual file paper, not the paper that is going to be cut down. So make sure it bleeds further. And the same thing down here, we can make also this frame maybe also bigger. I'm going to keep this one in the middle the same because I don't think it needs to be bigger, but I think this one down here could definitely be bigger because it could be more effectful if it was, oh, the wrong one. If it was like this. Like this instead. And now we can also zoom in on this image, zoom it in a little bit and show more of it, or just draw some extra if you want it to be, maybe just center it, maybe just move it a little bit like this so we have more space around it. If you don't want to zoom it in, you can always just add the drawing, what is missing, add here all the way out. And remember, when you make an image bleed all the way, you have to draw all the way out here. All this needs to be filled, even though the page will be cut down around here. You still need to draw all the way out here, like we said. The bleed needs to be filled and beyond. Yes, so now we're already getting a more of a manga feel, and we can do the same on the other side. I'm going to quickly just make some of these frames more bleeding out into the page, like this.
While you're doing that, I'm going to hold this up to the camera. I hope you guys can see it. I just picked up one of our books off of my shelf. This is Dekoboko Sugar Days, which is super, super, super cute. And I want to show these two spreads. I know it's not going to be very easy to see from the camera here, but you can see all the different panel sizes there.
Mm-hmm.
You can even see up here where the character here, this character is in front of this panel. There's some really interesting placement there. You can see the different gutters that are being used. There's a nice thick gutter here. And then these guys just line up completely because they're in very quick succession. So picking up your own books and taking a look and seeing what the creators are doing. And now that you've got this great insight from Natalia, you'll start to understand why they're doing it as well.
Yeah. And it's very important to also look different look in mangas that is from the genre that you're gonna work with. So if you're gonna make mangas that are action, look in action manga books. If you're gonna make more of a horror manga, look in mangas that are horror comics, because the layouts are totally different in some spaces. Like if you compare, for example, shoujo, which is a girl comic, it doesn't have to be for girls, but it's often more oriented towards drama and romance, and you compare it with a comic that is more action loaded or thriller, you will see there's a different way of doing these storyboards and layout pages. So if you want to make more of an action, you need more diagonal lines, and sometimes the gutter disappears between the frames. But in a more drama setting, you usually have frames that are on top of each other or character that pops out. So make sure your style of the pages fits the genre. That's very important.
Very important. I'll give an example here. This is a horror manga. This is Paramitan, Tales from Beyond. Lots of very, very dark panels there. This is a very creepy, tense scene.
Yeah.
Still got a lot of really interesting different panel shapes to help you with the speed which you're reading. And
you can still see, like, if that book, if you open it up, you can still see that in the spine you don't put information.
Yes, there's nothing there. There's just white, and that's
Yep.
fine. That's what you want there.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yes.
you can have, for example, here, there is information going into the spine, but it's a spread. None of that information is being lost there. And to compare it, to do the comparison, we have here a lovely shoujo title called Konohana Kitan. This is volume 4. Much softer, more delicate. You can see the different uses of tones in there. It's a very different style. So yes, absolutely do your research with the type of book you want to create. We do have a question here, Natalia. We have,
Yes.
is it important that final art be vector or JPEG's okay? What's best for editors? I can answer here not as an editor, but as a publisher. JPEGs are fine. We're typically going to ask for layered files. It sort of depends on what stage we're at. If we're just looking at it, JPEGs are going to be fine, but typically we're going to be looking at Photoshop files, maybe Illustrator files, anything that's going to show off those layers. So as long as you're, the important thing is to communicate with editors and ask, what do you need? But ultimately, we're going to need to use layered files because we're probably going to need to do a little bit of editorial and maybe shift a couple things around if it turns out maybe the bleed didn't quite work there. I mean, a good editor will always communicate that with the creator, and they won't just make changes without saying, hey, we've also made these changes. Are you okay with that? But yeah, so make sure whatever files you're giving over are layered. That's going to be the most important thing. We'll do the rest. We'll convert them how we need them after that.
And also when you talk with the editor about the layered files, make sure you know what program they need to have the file working, because Clip Studio Paint, the working files from Clip Studio Paint doesn't work in Photoshop, but you can export with layers from Clip Studio Paint to Photoshop. So you can make a Photoshop version of this page. So you don't have to worry about the good thing with Clip Studio Paint is it's very adaptable towards Photoshop, because they know that a lot of editors use Photoshop. So that's a good thing. So now I made these pages more. Oh, we have another question. Do we?
Some editorials ask for scripts. Have you talked about how to structure one? So we did talk a little bit last week about doing your layout. I would check out episode 4. Natalia went over how to come up with your story concept, and then how to break that down into pages and then into panels. What she made is pretty much exactly the kind of thing that we are looking for in terms of scripts. Sometimes we make manga in-house. We're making one right now, the night before Christmas, Zero's Journey, which is scripted in-house and then is sent out to an artist in Japan to have the pencils done, and then it's brought back to the US for inking. And so there's a lot of back and forth with that kind of process, and that is exactly what our scripts look like. Like Natalia was saying earlier, it is like watching a movie with a blindfold on. It's very hard to track what's going on in a script, and then we get the pencils back, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I see it, I get it, you know. And that's where you need that artist's instinct on how to bring a script to life and put it onto the page.
That is really the tricky part about drawing comics, to learn how to develop a skill of viewing an image in your head, seeing it like visualizing it in your head before you put it on paper, and being able to twitch it around. So I'm going to talk a little bit more next time about the 180-degree rule, but that's one thing that you should remember. And I haven't talked about it in this episode, but we will talk about it in the next episode. So it might affect your sketches if you're not used to that rule. If you want to check it out, go Google 180 degrees rule. It's a rule from movies. It's about how to direct the cutting so you don't flip characters. So suddenly, if for example you're watching the stream and suddenly Kae and I flip sides, and you're like, oh no, and you're gonna be confused, and suddenly I'm in America and Kae is in Sweden, and everything's gonna be weird.
Oh no, like, I don't speak Swedish. That's the worst.
No, exactly. It's gonna be really complicated. So you don't want to break the 180 degrees rule. So Google that one, but we're gonna talk about it next time. So yeah, it's gonna be. So now I just marked where we're gonna cut the page later, and now I'm gonna remove this crop mark default border. I'm gonna, under view, I take away the crop mark default border, and then you're gonna see here how the actual manga spread is gonna look. I can even I think I can even crop it down just to show it for you. Let's crop this down. Yes, let's just crop it and see what happens. Maybe my computer hates me. But what I wanted to show you is how the final printed. Yeah, I think my computer hates me. It just shut down this frame. Let's
Oh
go back to it.
no.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So this is how the actual page will look in the book. In the middle here, we have the spine of the book. So that's gonna be in the spine. But we have on the left side, we have some things. On the right side, we have some frames that bleed out, and on the left side, we have some frames that bleed out. And make sure, like you can see, I decided to have not the same ones. So for example, this one up here, let's see if I can, this one up here, and this one up here, I made both of them bleed out. They both bleed out, but that's why I didn't make the same ones on the bottom also bleed out, because then it would be too similar. So instead, I made this one bleed out and this one bleed out, and that way I made it a little bit different. And also this one bleed out instead, and not this one. So this one doesn't bleed at all, and that way the frame, the whole spread looks more interesting to the eye because it's not too similar on both sides. But still, there's some things that reoccur. You have the face, this face here, for example, and this face here is going to be similar. We have, for example, these eyes, they look forward. Usually you want faces to face inwards into the spine. So if maybe I should have changed it, maybe I should have changed this one to look inwards instead, into the spine. That could be helping for the frames, for the reading, because you wanted to guide the reader towards the next page. So this, since this page is page number 1 and this is page number 2 in this spread, I probably would like to put this one looking on to the other side. So maybe I would change that quickly just to show you how it feels differently. If I just change this one, edit, and flip horizontally. So you see how, because this character now looks into the spread, it kind of guides the reader towards the next page. And that is also things you need to remember. You need the reader to continue from up here. So I'm gonna make, I don't know if I can make it in color. I'm gonna see if I can use another color. If I decide to use, for example, red instead. Yeah, let's see. So no, it's still black. No, this is how I want the reader to be guided. Like this, 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 this. This is how I want the reader to be guided on the page. And that's why I need to make sure that the reader here follows to the next page and go on to the next page. And that's why the face is looking that way. So yeah, now I did a big mess on this page. But yeah, I wanted to have this flip. So yeah. That's pretty much it. I think that's the lesson for today. I showed you how to put how different frames works. I showed you how to use your manuscript and make it into a comic, and how to mangafy it by using bleed, by using like directions, and make sure that the frames are different size. That's actually what is mangafied in the manga spread, and that's why I want you to remember that this is a spread. If this was a spread with one picture, go to manga books and just check how they do it and use that. And I recommend you to always, when you work, if you have trouble with coming up with a manga spread, look in a manga book. That is the best tip I can give you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty much it.
Well, thank you, Natalia. This was really useful. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I learned a lot this lesson too. This is very, very cool. It's really interesting learning this stuff. Again, cannot emphasize that enough. The best kind of research you can do is read a lot of manga. Read as much as you can.
Yes.
Take a look at what the pros are doing. Learn from them. You will learn so much from it. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Thank you, Natalia, for leading this.
Thank you.
A little bit of housekeeping at the end again. For all the previous classes, go to tokyopop.com/manga masterclass. We're going to have links to all of the previous live streams. We're going to have some images and stuff there. I will put up the spread that we had from Amalthea. I will actually also include the spreads from these books as well, so you guys can get a little bit of an idea of the different panels that we were talking about in the class. Don't forget about the Sir Princess Amalthea Kickstarter for the visual novel. This is really exciting. I've backed it. I can't wait to see it. I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. We have unlocked the item that I really wanted, which was the Palafax story. Amalthea's horse.
A bonus chapter. Yes,
I'm very
a bonus chapter with the horse.
That's great. That's going to be so much fun. Of course, you can pick up Sword Princess Amalthea. You can read it on our app, Pop Comics, which is free to download on the App Store or on Google Play. You can also buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, anywhere you can normally get books. Definitely check it out. It's a just fantastic 3-part series, really exciting and really fun. We are actually going to have another live stream next Wednesday, which is going to be a very exciting one. We are going to have the artist Xiao Do, who created The Way of Xiao, which is a manga that he created with artist friend Tonio Maicon, and they have made a manga about rap music. It's a shonen style manga where rap artists battle for the greatest number of fans, which gives them more power. It's fantastic. It's so exciting. It's a really interesting, very unique manga. Shaldo himself is actually a rap artist. He is going to be performing on the live stream. I really, really highly recommend you check it out. That's going to be next Wednesday, same time, same place. We will have it up on our social media, so keep an eye out for it. I believe that's it this time. I think that's everything we have here. As always, if you have any questions, go ahead and direct them to me, Kae@tokyopop.com. That's Kae@tokyopop.com, and I'll make sure that me and Natalia are able to answer your questions. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. This was really fun. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.